Our second text this morning come from the poet William Stafford. There are sheets up here if you want to take those for your perusal later. The first one is called Ask Me. Sometime when the river is ice, ask me mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. Others have come in their slow way into my thought, and some have tried to help or to hurt. Ask me what difference their strongest love or hate has made. I will listen to what you say. You and I can turn and look at the silent river and wait. We know the current is there, hidden, and there are comings and goings from miles away that hold the stillness exactly before us. What the river says, that is what I say. And then this one, are you Mr. William Stafford? Well, yes, but, it was yesterday. Sunlight used to follow my hand, and that's when the strange siren-like sound flooded over the horizon and rushed through the streets of our town. That's when sunlight came from behind a rock and began to follow my hand. It's for the best, my mother said. Nothing can ever be wrong for anyone truly good. So later the sun settled back and the sound faded and was gone. All along the streets, every house waited, white, blue, gray. Trees were still trying to arch as far as they could. You can't tell when strange things with meaning will happen. I'm still here writing it down just the way it was. You don't have to prove anything, my mother said. Just be ready for what God sends. I listened and put my hand out in the sun again. It was all easy. Well, it was yesterday, and the sun came. Why, it came. In that first poem Stafford wrote, sometime when the river is ice, ask me the mistakes I have made. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. What a great thing to think on. Ask me whether what I have done is my life. So look back on your years on the planet. Think about all the things that you have done. And is that your life? Looking back in my life, I have done many things. I have been babysitter, camp counselor, kitchen grunt, dishwasher, deli counter clerk. There's a lot of clerking here, so hang on. Dairy Queen ice cream counter clerk, mailroom clerk. I have done database entry. I've been a secretary, aquarium store clerk, special events coordinator, otherwise known as the seminary's cruise director. I've been a historical researcher for an author. I've been a Hebrew tutor, a probability and statistics tutor, bet you didn't know that one, a housekeeper, a lighting technician, a social worker for people living with HIV and AIDS, a hospital chaplain, a retirement community chaplain, a mediator, a conflict transformation expert, a stewardship and adaptive change consultant, a pastor, and a preacher. And those are just the jobs I've been paid for. I've also been a pack mule for 2 incredible children, holder of wipes and hand sanitizer, passer out of tissues, dog walker, and last-minute cupcake maker. I have no defense for this random list, except to say that each job has brought me into connection with people with whom I would not otherwise, were it not for that bit of employment. And therefore, I discovered things I never would have any other way. The amazing thing is that each job offered curious insight to reveal some skill I had, some gift within, alongside, let me be honest, the candid and frank, cut to the chase, no holding back, clumsy incompetence. Learned that along the way. For a time, I was forbidden from using knives in the Camp Whiteman kitchen because I kept cutting myself, and food would have to be thrown away, and the cutting board repeatedly sanitized. There was the time I got my hand caught in the blizzard machine. That hurts. And the time I sliced off a good chunk of my thumb cleaning the deli slicer. I learned how completely tedious and incredibly fickle databases are, and I can give powerful testimony to the limits of my multitasking skills as a secretary. In the hospital and at bedsides, I learned how little I actually bring. With all of my theological education, my training and title, how insignificant it all is when you're holding the hands of the parents of a teenage boy who was brain dead because his girlfriend didn't call the ambulance soon enough after an overdose, as they're trying to decide whether to cease life support and donate his organs. Or when you're holding the 80-pound man weeping and covered in Kaposi's sarcoma sores, cut off from his children, his family, and his friends because he had AIDS. You just show up. You offer a hand. And you hope, like anything, that God has it covered. So ask me whether what I have done is my life. The psalmist puts it this way in our text this morning: God, investigate my life. Get all the facts firsthand. I'm an open book to you. Even from a distance, you know what I'm thinking. The psalmist here invites God into conversation about life. And what's so comforting and profound about this bit of sacred scripture is the wisdom that all of life, all of it, is wrapped up in God's blessed embrace. All of the mistakes and the incompetency, as well as the gifts and the treasures and the success. All of it because God is there constantly, but in a good way. Let me say something. I remember being told as a kid to behave because God was watching, right? I know some of you have had a similar kind of upbringing, and it was like Santa, but all year round, right? Who knows when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake, he knows if you've been good or bad, so you had better be good, for goodness sake. Of course, all of this was how our parents got us to have good behavior, as right and as wrong and as spiritually damaging it might have been to know that God was always watching. But here in Psalm 139, God's watchfulness is about a caring presence at every moment of our lives, not a judging one. Because you know when I leave and when I get back. I'm never out of your sight. You know everything I'm going to say before I even start the first sentence. I look behind me and you're there. Then up ahead and you're there too. Your reassuring presence coming and going. This is too much. Too wonderful. I can't take it all in. Is there any place I can go without you, God? And in this constant presence of God, we journey through life with all its twists and its turns and its setbacks and its triumphs. Ask me whether what I have done is my life is Stafford's attempt to affirm that journey as sacred, even in its imperfection, even the currents that would have tempted us to go off course. And the psalmist expresses the relief and joy knowing that the constant through all of it is this God of love and mercy, grace and hope, who held them every bit of the way. Because you know what? You know me inside and out. You know every bone in my body. You know exactly how I was made bit by bit, how I was sculpted from nothing into something. Like an open book, you watched me grow from conception to birth. All the stages of my life were spread out before you. Every stage, an open book. And what I find comfort in these words is the truth that neither our achievement nor our confidence qualifies us to live and serve in God's presence. And just as it's significant, neither does our inadequacy inhibit us. Instead, it's God who prepares us out to live our lives, to live our vocations, our calling, and lives as people of God. And that vocation, that life we've been given, is as unique, of course, as a thumbprint, as distinctive as the shape and form of our souls reaching up toward God and out toward the experiences of life and the people and the places and times where God needs us to be God's people. So ask me whether what I've done is my life. In the living it out, as messy as it is, we find ourselves working to create a life well lived, to be fully human as God intended us. And I love how Barbara Brown Taylor puts it in her book, An Altar in the World. She says this to us, fellow human beings trying to make our way. My advice is not to think about this too much, since thinking about it will not only make you crazy, but will also take you out of the world where you can practice being fully human yourself. Jesus clearly thought this was the best plan. When people wanted him to tell them what God's realm was like, he told them stories about their own lives. When people wanted him to tell them God's truth about something, he asked them what they thought. With all kinds of opportunities to tell people what to think, Jesus told them what to do instead. Wash feet. Give your stuff away. Share your food. Favor reprobates. Pray for those who are out to get you. Be the first to say, I'm sorry. For those who took him as their model, being fully human became a full-time job. It became a vocation in itself, no matter what they happened to do for a living. Indeed. So ask me whether what I've done is my life. I end this morning with the poet that I began with, William Edgar Stafford. I'm going to read you his second poem once again and tell you this about him. He was born in Kansas in 1914 and grew up during the Depression as his family moved from town to find work for his father. To help out, Stafford did a whole host of jobs, including delivering newspapers, working in sugar beet fields, and as an electrician's apprentice. He was drafted into the armed forces in 1941, but he was a pacifist and registered as a conscientious objector. And so he worked performing alternative service from 1942 to 1946, doing forestry and soil conservation work in Arkansas, Illinois, and California. He eventually received master's and PhD degrees and became a professor of English for most of his career at Lewis and Clark College. His first book of poetry wasn't published until he was 48. But over his lifetime, he wrote 22,000 poems and became what we now call Poet Laureate in 1970. Well, Stafford died of a heart attack in Oregon in 1993, having written his last poem that very morning, entitled, Are You Mr. William Stafford? Where it seems he finally had an answer to his question, ask me whether what I have done is my life. Are you Mr. William Stafford? Yes, but, well, it was yesterday. Sunlight used to follow my hand. And that's when the strange siren-like sound flooded over the horizon and rushed through the streets of our town. That's when sunlight came from behind a rock and began to follow my hand. It's for the best, my mother said. Nothing can ever be wrong for anyone truly good. So later the sun settled back and the sound faded and was gone. All along the streets, every house waited, white, blue, gray. Trees were still trying to arch as far as they could. You can't tell when strange things with meaning will happen. I'm still here writing it down just the way it was. You don't have to prove anything, my mother said. Just be ready for what God sends. I listened and put my hand out in the sun again. It was all easy. So that's it, friends. A life well lived in the presence of a God who holds us in every moment. You are blessed, and you are enough. The thing is, you don't have to prove anything. Just be ready for what God sends. Amen.